What do you do when there is a problematic line in the Torah or any other text you respect and take seriously? There are different strategies, there are different things people do. You can read it and ignore the difficulty. You can read Hebrew as it is, but use the translation as a means of interpretation to make it sound better in English. You can change both Hebrew and English, or you can look into the text's undercurrents, go deep into linguistics and metatexts, and try to interpret it in an acceptable way. There is a Talmudic story in Tractate Yevamot, which describes the long-standing machloket, disagreement, between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. Talmud records a story that for 3 years there was a dispute between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. One says the halacha is in agreement with our views, and the other says the halacha is according to our views. A resolution was reached when a bat kol, a heavenly voice, appeared and announced, Ilu ve'ilu divrei Elohim chaim. The sayings of both are the words of the living God. But the halacha is in agreement with the rulings of Beit Hillel. Talmudic sages ask, why was the halacha established to follow the opinion of Hillel? It is because the students of Hillel taught their own ideas as well as the ideas from the students of Shammai. In other words, the Talmudic story concludes that people do not need to agree with each other and hold the same worldview about everything, but a wise person is the one who knows and understands views of others, even though they may disagree. This week's Torah portion is called Ki Tetzeh, meaning literally, when you go out. It is a reference to the war Israelites were about to go to when they entered the Promised Land. This parasha begins with setting a hypothetical case. When you go out to war against your enemy, and the eternal one, your God, delivers them into your power, and you take a captive, what do you do when you get into a possession or into a position of power? It was not too long ago when you yourself, when Israelites themselves and their parents were slaves. How do you choose to treat your captives when it was you who was a captive not so long ago? History teaches us that it is not enough to win the war. You also need to win the peace after the war. Social behavior, expectations, and laws should be different in different circumstances. We can see ourselves that we do not feel in the same way about coronavirus now than we did from when we did in the time when it all started to unfold. I would like to focus on just one verse from this week's parasha, the commandment of Shiluach HaKen, sending away the mother bird. The mitzvah promises a long life to a person who performs it. Ve'arachta yamim, literally, and your days will be long, meaning that you will enjoy many days of your life. Another mitzvah that promises a long life is honoring one's parents, from the Ten Commandments. The Babylonian Talmud has a story about it. Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya once saw a father and a child standing next to a tree. The father instructed his child to get some eggs from the tree. The child climbed the tree, got to the nest, sent away the mother bird, but suddenly lost his balance, fell on the ground, and died. This child had fulfilled both the obligation to honor his parents and to send away the mother bird. Yet, he had not had a long life. Elisha ben Abuya was so shocked by what he saw that he abandoned Judaism after it. This story contradicts the Torah, the highest authority for the Jewish people. Why did Talmudic sages preserve, and why did they tell us this story? Elohim nimtza bepratim ktanim. God is found in small details, says the Hebrew expression. Not many people know that this expression isn't complete. The full version adds v'gam Satan, and Satan too. Attention to small details can become a blessing, but also a curse. What happens when we take a commandment to the extreme? There comes a time when a religious commandment, as indeed any rule, needs an interpretation, an exception, or a change. When you give the ultimate authority to commandments, they become your idol. Judaism becomes a religion of worshiping laws. Judaism and Jewish stories allow us to argue, to disagree, and to be direct with God. Because when you are honest and direct with God, you are honest and direct with yourself. Sometimes we need to say that the law doesn't work the way it was supposed to. In fact, I believe it is our responsibility to challenge the law and to tell truth to the power. Shiluach haken, sending away the mother bird, and honoring your parents are important commandments. But they are not magic rituals which answer to all your questions and make you happy. The Torah portion Ki Tetzeh demands facing difficult and challenging situations in which the average human being might not behave ethically, and yet it prescribes a way to keep as high moral standard as you can. Ki Tetzeh begins with a situation of major national crisis such as war, but then the narrative moves and zooms in to discussing details of our daily life, such as getting eggs for your table and food for your table. One might assume that the basic human response to crisis is to descend to the lowest level of behavior. The wisdom of our tradition reminds us that it is precisely when we are in crisis that our moral sensibility becomes most fragile and yet most essential. The time we are living in now is often compared to a wartime in terms of its impact on our society. In just a few weeks' time, our synagogue will reopen the doors for a very limited number of people. It will be a different experience for all. Our security professionals and volunteers will be asking people to wear masks and to keep 2 meter distance from each other. There will be a limited number of people in the synagogue, no Kiddush, no social gatherings in the premises before or after the service, no singing, no food, no handshakes. One may ask, what's the point of being in the building when these restrictions are in place? We've been working so hard to establish a community of trust, respect, and welcoming. And all this list and all these details of synagogue life, such as a handshake, such as a communal singing, were designed to make it welcoming. Today, we must be creative to achieve our goals, but using different means. Socially distant walk in the park before or after the service, pre-recording our beautiful music before each service, like we do now, and you've been listening to it for almost half a year, using cameras and microphones to live stream all prayers and classes, and yet There is something powerful in saying prayers with others, in hearing other voices, in seeing other people around you. We are still in the time of national crisis. When we will open our doors, we will have to learn how to pray and be together in a blended hybrid community. We will learn how to not worship laws of the coronavirus and regulations of the coronavirus, but to keep our focus with what is really important. We will have to learn how to keep the right balance between ensuring the compliant guidance and remaining spiritual, welcoming, and understanding. We will have to learn that ilu ve'ilu, divrei Elohim chayim, both virtual and in-person participation, are the words of the living God. Shabbat shalom. And hopefully next week, this time, we will see each other still online, but Rabbi Alex and myself will be in the synagogue. Shabbat shalom.